Now, parents are at their wits' end, are often desperate to teach their kids right from wrong. But is public shaming ever the answer? One father has outraged many online by posting a photo of his 3-year-old daughter wearing a sign declaring that she'd gone to the toilet in the shower and giving her dad permission to use the photo in her future yearbook. Now, we're joined now by author and parenting coach Dr. Justin Coulson from happyfamilies.com.au. Good morning to you, Justin.
Good morning, Steve.
Does disciplining like this ever work?
The short answer is no. I think that this particular story, the man did it in jest and in fun, but it's turned into something a lot bigger than that. And no, it doesn't work. All it does is make kids feel lousy about themselves. And it damages relationships between parents and children. Imagine the person that you're supposed to trust more than anything in the world telling you that you're a thief or a liar or that you poop in the wrong place and that you're just no good, you're not good enough. It's a terribly destructive thing for a relationship.
It's a violation of trust, isn't it? Trust should form the basis of your relationship with your child.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One of the other challenges that we might face when we see this situation as well is, as kids get older, this is the sort of thing that in the social media world that we have now, this can lead to bullying and ostracism and all kinds of things that could pop up later on that aren't going to make us feel real good about life.
Now, I think social media is adding to the problem. We're seeing a photo here. One mother in the US hijacked her daughter's Facebook account, changed her profile picture to read, "I'm no longer allowed on Facebook or my phone. Please ask why. My mum says I have to answer everyone that asks." What kind of effect would this be having on that girl?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because you hear a story like this and you want to laugh. You sort of go, oh, that's really funny, that's really creative. Good on the parents for teaching those kids a lesson. But all it really teaches them is that, as we've already mentioned, mum and dad can't be trusted, firstly. But secondly, it makes them feel unworthy. It makes them feel like they're not good enough. It makes them feel like they're just a bad person. And that's the lesson that's taught, not I need to be careful with the way I communicate on Facebook from now on.
Let's take a look at this young boy. I know he was a bit of a problem. This is another story from the US. Sorry, this is the one from Townsville up in Queensland, actually. A mum made headlines when she made a son wear a sign proclaiming him a thief. If a parent is trying to stamp out something serious like stealing, is this sort of action acceptable?
No. No, this kid's walking up and down the street in the Townsville Mall, and once again, when you look at the forums online around this issue, there are a bunch of parents going, wow, good on you, mum. You know, you've really taught him a lesson. But what's really been taught is that mum and dad have got the power, and that the child is powerless, and he just looks like a fool in front of everybody. I don't think he's sat there and said, you know, gee, I'm never going to steal again. I've really learnt from this. Well,
because kids learn from their parents, don't they? So yeah. What does that teach them?
Exactly. It teaches them that the person with the power wins. Might is right. I'm the big one. I decide what happens to you, and that's all that there is to it. There's no real internalisation of the message that we want our kids to get when we shame them, when we humiliate them, when we ostracise them.
All right, let's have a look at this this other story that I was mentioning. It's another boy in the US. He was having a few problems at school, and I think he cursed at the teacher. But his mum made him wear a sign apologising for what he'd done out the front of the school, getting very creative with the punishment. Now, he'd already been suspended from school. If the school gives a punishment, is one punishment enough, or do the parents have to do something?
Well, you know, this is a really complex sort of situation, but really, I think that if we're going to force our kids to apologise, it's not an apology. An apology has to be real. So sticking a sign around their neck and saying, I'm so sorry, and it's, you know, written by mum or dad, or mum and dad have forced them to do it, that's not an apology.
OK, so quickly, how do we discipline our kids without shaming? OK,
first of all, remember that discipline is about teaching good ways to act. Discipline is not punishment. Punishment actually often does exactly the opposite. It doesn't teach good ways to act. Instead, discipline is a process. Instead of doing things to our kids, we should work with them, and that takes time. It's not a one-off. We should remember our kids' developmental capacity, because they can't do everything. They're young, they're growing, they're learning. Most importantly, when you were a kid and you were in trouble, and mum and dad were going blah, 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 blah at you, who was learning? Who was doing all the thinking then?
Look, I'd say probably the parents were doing more of the thinking.
Right. So when we ask questions, it gets our kids to think and internalise. And last of all, be a really great example, because our kids learn much more from what we do than from what we say.
All right, some great advice. Justin, thanks very much for joining us this morning. Hope that helps all the parents out there, Sarah.